Hey guys, I'm Ethan, co-host of the Shield Wall podcast. First off, thank you guys so much for listening. I wanted to ask all of you who enjoy our content to subscribe and comment wherever you listen. Follow us on social media. We're on all major platforms. If you have any episode suggestions or questions, definitely shoot us an email at shieldwallministries@gmail.com.
Well, good morning, OV. What? You guys didn't bring your... well, we're going to be talking about life today, and I figured that was appropriate since we could all die soon. So anyway, no, I'm just kidding. You wouldn't believe I rushed around all morning trying to find this face mask just for that joke. So the things us preachers go through. Turn to Ecclesiastes 1. Ecclesiastes 1, we're going to back in Ecclesiastes, and going to be getting into that a little bit. Started with some humor, because it is a little bit of a heavy passage and some heavy themes, as many of the passages in Ecclesiastes are. So it's quite a long text. We're going to actually go all the way through the end of chapter 2 today. And so we're going to read all the way through, and then I'm going to work back from the beginning, give you a little bit of introductory, and then we're just going to take it in chunks, work through the passage, see what we can learn from each kind of chunk of the scripture as we go through. And then we'll see how to understand what the author of Ecclesiastes is telling us in light of the whole of scripture and what we learn about all of this from the New Testament in Christ. So Ecclesiastes 1, we're going to be in verse 12. We'll go ahead and read. It says, I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and a striving after wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom, and to know madness, and to know folly. And I perceived that this also is but a striving after wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. I said in my heart, come now, I'll test you with pleasure, enjoy yourself. Behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks. I planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves, and I had slaves who were born in my house. I also had great possession of herds and flocks, more than any who were before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also, my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, and my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and that was my reward for my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. So I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what's been already done. Then I said that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there's more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceived that the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise as of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. how the wise dies just like the fool. So I hated life, because what is done under the sun was grievous to me, for all is vanity and striving after wind. I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me, and who knows whether he'll be wise or a fool, yet he will be master of all for which I toiled, and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. So I turned about, and I gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun. Because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. What has a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night his heart does not rest. This is also vanity. There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God, for apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy, but to the sinner he's given the business of gathering and collecting only to give to the one who pleases God. This also is vanity and striving after wind. It's the latter end of Ecclesiastes 1 and Ecclesiastes chapter 2. You see, kind of a heavy passage. That's why we started with a little humor. A little bit of reminder. The book of Ecclesiastes is likely written by Solomon. You heard that in the scripture, right? Solomon, this all-wise king of Israel, who was richer than anyone who came before and richer than anyone who came after, and he expanded the property of Israel beyond its bounds to its greatest extent at the time, and he built wonderful houses and wonderful gardens and all this stuff. He was known for his great, abundant riches and wisdom, and so you see kind of that person in the text. And what Solomon's doing, remember, Solomon has written a lot of wisdom literature. He wrote a lot of the Proverbs. And in the Proverbs, he takes a different tone of voice, right? He considers God more. He brings God into the equation. He lives his life unto God more and has the idea of God and his purpose in creation built into his assessment of things. But in the book of Ecclesiastes, he's kind of taking a different perspective, and he's actually taking a more man-centered perspective, right? He's saying, man can't really see outside of this created order. He can only really perceive what is under the sun, as he calls it, life under the sun. That's life within this created order. And so he kind of takes this idea where he said, I'm going to take a more man-centered approach. It's called anthropocentric. If you ever read it in a book, you can tell that to someone this week, and now you got a new word. Anthropocentric. It takes a man-centered view of the world. So we could also say he takes a deistic view of the world. Actually, in this service, I forgot to explain deism last week. So deism is a belief system that God created the universe and he just kind of let it go, and then he kind of stays separated from creation. He's not really involved. Maybe he'll come in every now and then to do something, but he's mostly removed, and he's not involved in the day-to-day life, and he doesn't really even care about it that much. He's just kind of letting creation cycle through its paths. It's a very popular belief system throughout history as people considered man and the gods and the relationship of deism. And so it's almost a deistic view, right? God might have created, he might have put these things into work, but he's not really involved, and I'm not really giving him due consideration for the life that I see, my consideration of this life under the sun. We can also say maybe this is a secular understanding in a sense, because in a secular understanding, they completely do away with the fact that there might be a God behind the universe and controlling things in creation. And so we're just looking at life in this created order. And these are some of the solutions he comes to. So with that, we're going to walk through the text, and we're just going to see kind of in chunks what we can learn and what we can remember about what we've learned in previous weeks and how it applies to our culture. Starting in verse 12. Solomon says, I, the preacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. Now right there, we remember, right, this is the wise pursuit of the Old Testament. This is what wisdom literature is in the Old Testament. We have Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, the Song of Solomon even, the book of Job. These are wisdom literature, and they're trying to discern the order by which God created. So they're trying to discern God's order in creation, and they say God created the world through wisdom, It's a characteristic of God, so his wisdom is in the order of creation. And a wise life is going to sit back and it's going to try to discern what is the order of creation. How did God design this thing? And I might try to line up my heart disposition and my actions in life to try to come in line with that so I might live a good life. So this is what he's doing. He said, this is what I did. I stepped back. I applied my heart to seek this out. And then he says, it is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. And now that could apply to this wise pursuit, this pursuit of wisdom. He'll actually give voice to that in the next section of scripture we'll look at. But I wonder if maybe he's actually just saying life in general. And I've been in Ecclesiastes for about a month now, and as I really think about the author of Ecclesiastes, I think he's just talking like life, living. That's an unhappy business that God's given man to do, live in this creation. That seems to be kind of his expression that he's giving there. So, there it is. It's an unhappy business that God's given to the children of man to be busy with, this living thing. See, I've seen everything that's done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and striving after wind. That word vanity, we've talked about that. It's the Hebrew word hevel. And we've used the word hevel because it communicates more than the idea of vanity, right? We said hevel is the word, and it refers to like a smoke or a vapor. It talks about the insubstantiality of things or the unsatisfying nature of things. It's like something that looks solid, but when I try to grasp it, it just dissipates. It disappears in a puff of smoke, as it were. It's like chasing a shadow, as it were. And so actually that other phrase he uses, chasing after the wind, he'll use that repeatedly through the scripture we're using today. He said, we're chasing after wind. We're trying to grab onto something that's solid, but it's like chasing after wind. You can't grab it. It just keeps blowing away, and then you strive after it more, and you grab it, and you can't get it, and it just keeps going. And it's a whole life of just toiling after trying to grab something substantial, something you can hold on to, something that's true and real, something you can put your life upon. In this life, everything just seems substantial. I've looked at it all. I've looked at man's pursuits, what they try to put themselves into. I've looked at the cycles of creation. I've looked at how nations behave with one another. I've looked at all of relationships and everything, and I find that there's nothing's real, nothing's substantial. It all ends up in hevel. It's all purposeless. It's all meaningless. You can't find anything that satisfies in this world. And that's kind of his big theme throughout the letter. He said, what is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. He's referring here to something we've also talked about in previous weeks, the brokenness of creation. He recognizes that creation is not as it should be. The brokenness of creation. What is crooked cannot be made straight. He said, this is this life under the sun that I see. It's crooked. It's lacking something, but we can't fill it up. We can't count enough to fill it up, and we can't straighten it out. We live in a broken creation. So it gives voice to that. Moving on, verse 16. He said, I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who are over Jerusalem before me. And my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. And so in the very first week, Aaron talked about this idea that you can live a wise life, you can live a foolish life, or you can live a naive life. And we've kind of been thinking in these paradigms of what is wisdom, what is just clear foolishness and a clear foolish path to walk. And then maybe what is a naive path? I don't really take any firm stance. I just kind of let the world blow me where it will, and I'll end up wherever the currents of the world take me. And so he's kind of talking in that type of language, and he says, I studied wisdom, madness, folly. I looked at it all to see what these paths are and what they lead to. He said, I perceived that this also, all of it, is but a striving after wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. And there's a truth to this, is there not? Right? If you live in a broken creation, to perceive, right? To look beyond the surface, to look beyond the veneer or the facade of this world, to try to find what is actually the substance at the core of this. What's something that's actually real, something I can really lean on. And in a broken creation, you're going to always end up where the author of Ecclesiastes ends up. You're going to see hevel. You're going to see something insubstantial. You're going to see, boy, right when I thought I could rely on something, I tried putting my weight on it and it dissipated. Right when I tried to grab something, I thought, okay, this is something I can count on. I found out that it was insubstantial. It doesn't satisfy. It doesn't bring me joy. I can't find meaning or purpose in that thing. It's hevel. And he says, so this life of wisdom, it actually creates a lot of vexation, because the more wisdom you gain, the more you're perceiving how this broken creation works, and the more brokenness you see. And it's a very real fact that he's saying. This life of wisdom can lead to a lot of vexation and sorrow. And it kind of gives voice to the idea that ignorance really is bliss. Ignorance really is bliss, right? Like, probably I would contend to you that probably some of the happiest or most joyful people you know, now unless they're like a very sanctified individual who just really knows their identity in the Lord and holds firm to that and they radiate that, grab hold of those people and pour into them or have them pour into you so that you might learn from them. But most people who are just really content in life, they're people who just don't think about negative things that much. They don't sit back. They don't try to perceive deeply. They don't try to look beyond the surface. They kind of take the facade and they're happy with it. And they might be aware that they do this, but they're able to stay more positive because they're not dwelling on the brokenness. And so there's this idea that to really perceive deeply is to create a lot of vexation and sorrow that comes from this. And there's this idea that, in a sense, ignorance really can be bliss. Moving on. Chapter 2 has said, I said in my heart, come now, I'll test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad. And of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine. Well, my heart was still guiding me with wisdom throughout this, and I sought how to lay hold on folly. Listen to that. How to lay hold on folly. That's what he's trying to do. Till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. So this is something we've also talked about, right? What is good for the children of man to do? I'm trying to say, what is the good life? And I see as I kind of try to sit back and be the wise individual, this leads to a lot of sorrow and a lot of vexation. So I said, maybe just pleasure, right? All these people who are partying all the time, boy, they seem to be happy and they have all these funny stories to tell and they go to another party and all these people are kind of giving themselves a dissipation. They seem to be pretty content. They seem to be pretty chill. Maybe every pleasure that I might have, I might just give it loose, let it go. And, we got to recognize this is the mantra of our culture in a lot of ways, is it not? Right? Any desire you might have, don't repress that. Don't repress anything in you. That's what it is to be a free individual, to give vent or to give life to all of your desires and to let them go. As long as you're not hurting anybody, pursue those desires. If it's a desire, it's good and it's real. And that's who you really are. Pursue that. Pursue those pleasures. Pursue everything you can. Get what you can in this life. The author, Solomon, said, I did that. I did that better than just about anyone. And I end up saying of laughter, it's mad. Yeah, that laughter, it was fun for the moment, but then I found out it was done. And I had to find something else to laugh at. And I had to find something else to laugh at. And then I had to find something else to laugh at. And pretty soon I just became maniacal, right? I'm just chasing temporary joys, chasing surface level joys or happinesses that I'm chasing. He said that it's a madness. I said of pleasure, what use is it? I've given vent to all this pleasure. I've pursued every pleasure that I've had. And I'm not satisfied. I'm not content. I need more pleasure. I need more pleasure, and I need more pleasure. He talks about all the concubines that he would have, which Solomon's known for. Over 700 in his harem, from what we know elsewhere. And what we find is he was never satisfied. He always needed more, more, more. He said, this is hevel. This is vanity. So he said, okay, pleasure, that didn't, pursuing every pleasure, that wasn't working for me. What about success? What if I actually built something? What if I actually built something that would endure? What if I continue to grow and to continue to better myself and really succeed in life? And that's what he does next. He said, I made great works. I built houses. I planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks, and I planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. Fruit trees are great. He had all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools, which to water the forest of growing trees, he created pools to water all these trees. I bought male and female slaves. I had slaves who were born in my house. I had all kinds of servants. I didn't have to do anything hard. I had all these great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers. I had beautiful music, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. So I became great, and I surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. I was so great. And boy, my wisdom remained with me the whole time. And whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all that toil while it lasted, and that was just my reward for all my toil. And then I considered all that my hands had done, and all that toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all of it was vanity and striving after wind, and there's nothing to really be gained under the sun. He tried success. He tried to achieve it all. He tried to really make it in this world, right? He tried to get out of the circumstances he was born into and better himself and go bigger, right? And he said, boy, I just needed more and more. I had to build a bigger house. But that wasn't satisfying, so I had to build a bigger house. And then I planted a garden. Boy, that was a beautiful garden. But then I needed more gardens. And I needed more trees. And I started having to ship them in from other countries to make it exotic and rare. And then I needed to build great fountains to water all those things. And boy, I had to get some slaves. But then as I kept building and building, I needed more slaves and servants to really make this thing run. And I was the cream of the crop. I made it, right? I achieved it. And this, in our common vernacular, we would say, this guy achieved the American dream. This is a type A, go-getter guy. Man, he made a living, right? He really succeeded in this world. He really did something. He really accomplished something. Achieved the American dream. And he says, that didn't actually satisfy me. I just needed more and more. And actually kept drawing me more and more and more into it. One wife wasn't enough. I needed multiple wives eventually. One concubine wasn't enough. I needed hundreds of concubines. One horse wasn't enough. I needed horses from all over the world. I imported all these horses from Egypt to just show people how flush in cash I was. And that wasn't satisfying. It wasn't meaningful, and there was no value in it. I still had angst. I was still striving after wind. I could never catch the wind. I was striving and striving and striving. The only joy I had in all this was the joy of momentary successes. But then that flit away, and I was still in this broken creation. So I'd have to succeed and do something else. But then that joy would flit away. He said that was the only pleasure I had, was just the joy from those. You know, in our culture, we all know that like money doesn't make you happy, right? We all know this. We all know that getting and getting and getting and adding is not really the answer, and it doesn't really fix your real problems in life. But then all of us kind of say, but boy, I'd like to try. Boy, I'd like to try. Right? We see these celebrities and we see them, they had it all. Boy, they built big houses. They had beautiful cars. They were the adoration of the whole nation, and they had so much money. They didn't know what to do with it, and we see it lead to despair, and it just eats them alive. And we say, boy, what a tragedy. I can't believe that person's life ended in suicide. But boy, we were like, boy, what a tragedy. But also in the back of our mind, we're saying, man, if I could switch places with him, I think I could do it well. I don't think I would get enslaved by the money. I don't think I would try to strive after the wind. I think I could be content. I think I can find some satisfaction. I just had a little bit more. We all know here that that's a lie. Almost none of us know it here. You know, the reality is, even in the church, a lot of you guys have things in your life that you just totally take for granted and you don't even appreciate anymore. That were things that maybe a few years ago you were on your knees begging God for it, saying, God, if I could just get this, I just need this. God, would you please deliver? Would you please? And you got it. Praise the Lord. And now it's not satisfying. You don't even pay attention to it because you're on your knees and you're asking for something else. We're striving after wind. Can't catch it. Moving on. It said, so I turned, this is verse 12. It said, I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. He said, okay, I'm going to step back. I'm going to start again. I tried to pursue that foolish life. I tried to pursue those successful life. He said, I'm going to start again. I'm actually going to try to live a life of wisdom. This is more stoicism, and also an ancient idea. The first one was hedonism or Epicureanism. These are ancient things. They existed in ancient Greece of people trying to find the good life. You had the Stoics, and then you had the Epicureans. The Epicureans were hedonists. Pursue all those pleasures. The Stoics say, no. Just pursue the life of the mind. Be detached from the world, right? Just try to live wisely. Don't get drawn into these things, all right? So he's saying, maybe I'll do it this way. He said, so I did this. He said, for what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what's been already done. And that's a little weird line to be in there. Throughout the book, he's going to kind of give little lines to his son after him. He said, my son, pay attention to this. My son, don't do this. And so there's this kind of one of those. He's saying, listen, all that stuff I just did, listen, I've done it, right? You can't do anything different than what I've done. It's going to end up in the same place, all right? So let's look at a different way. That's what's going on there. He said, then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person at least has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. So this is what he's saying. He's saying, okay, you know what? This wise life, stepping back, I knew that stuff was foolishness, right? I've been around in the world. I've seen people be successful and knew that it didn't really satisfy them. I've seen people try to build themselves into something and really give everything to themselves. Did you see all the myselfs, by the way, in that previous passage? I planted visions for myself. I made myself gardens. People were born in my house. I made myself pools. I gathered for myself silver and gold. I became great. It was whatever my eyes desired. It was my heart that I was trying to satisfy. Right, and we find that the human being is a bottomless pit. It can never be satisfied. You can try to, anything that redounds unto us, that we're saying, I'm doing this for myself, for myself, for myself, for myself. We're a bottomless pit. We'll never be satisfied. And he said, I've been around. I knew that was folly. But I was trying to find some pleasure in this world. I was trying to find some release in this broken creation. I thought, maybe I could do it better than just about anyone else. He said, I knew it was folly, but figured I'd give it a shot. But now I'm stepping back and I'm saying, you know what? Living a wise life, recognizing that those things don't satisfy, recognizing that those things don't give me any value or any meaning or any purpose in life that's really solid, something that is persistent. He said, recognizing that, that's better. It's the difference in walking in light and darkness. You know, because we're all going to the same place. He's going to talk about that in a second. We're all going to the same place. And if we're all going to the same place, you better walk there in light instead of walking there in darkness, right? If you're walking in the light, you can see everything. You can walk smoothly. You got your path in front of you. If you're walking in darkness, you're going to, crack your knee on a lot of things. You're going to twist an ankle a number of times. You might get hit by something low hanging, right? You're walking in darkness. If anyone's ever had to stumble to the bathroom in the middle of the night, with little kids who leave toys on the floor. I don't know. Is that anybody? You understand, but boy, I'd rather have done that in light than in darkness. And he's kind of saying the same thing. A wise life, not giving yourself to pleasure, not pursuing that hedonistic life that can destroy. We're all going to the same point, but you may as well live it wisely. That's better. Because you're going to get beat up a lot less on the way. He says, so this is better. However, is it ultimately meaningful? Does it ultimately satisfy? Does it have ultimate purpose? He says, I said in my heart, he says, yet I perceived that the same event happens to everyone. And I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise as of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten, and how the wise dies just like the fool. We're all going to die. And if I have no meaning outside of this created order, that's it. What was the purpose of it all? A few generations no one's going to remember. And a few thousand centuries maybe, we get hit by an asteroid, we get sucked into a black hole. This creation ceases to exist. What was the purpose of it all? He comes to that point and he says, so I hated life. Man, I just hated living. Because what is done under the sun was grievous to me. for all is vanity and striving after the wind. Underline that. I think it's the focus of the passage is I hated life. That's where he's building to. And then he kind of just goes on. The way a depressed person will, the way someone who's just like really burdened, well, they'll kind of just keep going and going because they just can't get it out. He's doing that in this next section. He says, I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun. Don't you understand? I hated it, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he'll be wise or a fool? Yet he'll be the master of all for which I've toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. So I turned about and I gave up my heart to despair over all this toil of my labors under the sun. Because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave it to everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. You see, he's just kind of repeating himself. Can't get over it. This also is vanity and a great evil. What has a man from all this toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow. His work is a vexation. Even in the night, his heart does not rest. Right? He's even anxious at night. He can't even get rest when he tries to go to sleep. Boy, if I could just get a few hours. So I just like take my mind off my heart, but even my heart's racing at night. My mind's racing at night. I can't even get rest. And he says, I hated life. That's a dark place, right? It's kind of come to a pretty dark place in his considerations and his striving to find value, to find meaning, to find a hope, to find joy in this life under the sun. But he's tried it all. And it all leaves him totally unsatisfied. He says, I hated life. It's almost suicidal, is it not? Oh, I hated living. Boy, would that I could just take myself out of existence instead of living another second in this unsatisfying, toilsome life. What's that look like? What's that look like in our culture? Because, our culture, we've lived the life of Solomon. We're a very rich country. We're almost decadent. We're so rich in this country. Compared to history, compared to everywhere else in the world, boy, we've lived the life of Solomon. We sure have. We're very unsatisfied. Perhaps more so than we ever have been in this country. I think a lot of times we say, boy, I hate life. I've just given up my heart to despair. What's that look like in our society? I think it looks like a few things. Between the years 2000 to 2017, there was a 40% increase in suicide in this country. 2018, 2019 has continued to climb. It's not stopping. In the same time period, to broaden it out, there was a 102% increase in what are called deaths of despair. And factored into that is suicide, but also drug-related deaths and alcohol-related deaths. These deaths where people are trying to escape and they give themselves into something, and this is called a death of despair. 102% increase. 2018, 2019, the numbers have come out. The trend continues. It's not stopping. That's today. That's today. It's here in Norfolk. It's here in the U.S. I think you see people are coming to where they, boy, I hate life. Would that I would just get rid of, be rid of myself instead of living another day in this existence. I think we see some of this in our culture. Another big one that we see in the headlines enough, if you're paying attention to it, euthanasia or physician-assisted suicide. What's the idea about that? It's saying someone can make a decision where they say, you know what, I'm done living. And I would like a doctor to come, a doctor who's taken the Hippocratic Oath and said, I swear to try to protect life and to try to pour into anything that will give someone life. And now say, now I want that doctor to turn around and help me achieve death. It's the achievement of personal autonomy, right? The last kind of thing that I can make a decision on in this life. The idol of our culture. Euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide. It's come to the point where you say, I don't want to live anymore, so I'm making the decision. I'm done. One big one. This week, Germany passed a law allowing euthanasia. That's a big deal because in Germany, they were one of the last Western holdouts of the nations. In the U.S. right now, it's about 9 states. And then also D.C. that's allowed it. So we're a little behind the West on this as well. Well, that's good. But Germany, they were one of the last holdouts, and there's a reason. It's because of an old German concept called Lebens unwerten Lebens. Life unworthy of life. It was the rationale for the Holocaust. Life unworthy of life. And you say, boy, yeah, the Holocaust, I can see that. Actually, that idea came up 20 years before the Holocaust. Before Hitler. Before it all. It was this idea. It's an idea created by philosophers in the universities that there are some lives that, boy, it's such a hard life, or it's not a life worth living. Better to just take them out of existence. It's a mercy. It's a mercy to them. Just take them out of existence instead of let them continue to live. This kind of hatred of any life that can be extra toilsome, right? They don't think of life as a good in and of itself. And then that rationale first went to those who were disabled and those who were old, the elderly. The gas chambers were actually built for those people first. And the Jews were actually put into that greater paradigm of life unworthy of life. And so even Germany, there's a reason. There's a reason they said, I'm not sure we really want to open up that idea again. Just passed it this week. Euthanasia. I think an example of us in this society, in this world, saying, I've come to the point where I hate life in some sense. Another one we see, abortion. What's the rationale behind abortion a lot of times? This baby's, this life is already so hard. This life is already so toilsome. It's already so hard. And so if this baby comes into an existence that isn't good, if I don't have the finances, if I don't have the ability to really pour into them, maybe I have to give them over to foster care or adoption. That's even in a harder life, right? It's even more toilsome. And we kind of hate life on their behalf, as it were. I say, that's a mercy. Instead of bringing them into this hard, toilsome life, I'll just kill them instead. I'll do away with that. We've kind of bought into that deception, as it were, in this culture. One of the most stark examples of this was last year. CBS report, almost celebrating an achievement in Iceland. Almost 100% elimination of Down syndrome in Iceland. And as you read the article, you find it's because they got really good at prenatal scanning. And they achieved almost 100%, eliminating those who might have Down syndrome in the womb. There's this idea that we hate life. We think it's so hard and toilsome. And any extra barrier that might come up, any extra burden that might come up, well, I'll hate life on that person's behalf. Of course, we live in the day of, unfortunately, tragically, the shout your abortion era. Where people are now proud to say, I don't want my own life to be more toilsome. I don't want my own life to be more hard. It's already hard enough. I need to get myself in a better place. And so I'll give away the life of this other being so that my life doesn't become harder. It's a deep deception in our culture. I know that probably hit close to home for a lot of us. We know someone. We've been in it ourselves. I want to emphasize, anytime we talk about this subject, there's total, complete healing and grace and mercy in the Lord for everything that we've done that's wrong against Him. We believe that God gives life as a gift, and it's a joy that He's intricately involved in life from the time of its conception to the time of its death, and that it's a good in and of itself. We believe in the sanctity and the value of every single human being, from the time that God creates a human being at conception to the time where He brings them into eternity. And a lot of us, we've bought into the deception of not believing those things. And the Lord is merciful in that. We've all sinned against the Lord a million ways. And it's all been putrid and evil and wicked in a lot of ways. Every single one of us in this room. At the core of our faith is the fact that God said, I know, and I love you anyway, and I've come and I'm taking the pain for that. And I'm taking the penalty for that, so that you don't have to live in those deceptions and those lies anymore. Another one's the birth rate decline. People aren't having babies. A demographer for USC simply said, the reason the birth rate's not going up is because the birth rate is a barometer of despair. People won't make plans to have babies unless they're optimistic about the future. It's been really surprising. People thought, economy, boy, it's been great. Birth rate almost always goes up. People aren't. There's a deeper problem driving that. But there's people saying, boy, this life is already so toilsome and hard, and we hate it already in some sense. We don't think of life as a good in and of itself, so we're not going to bring new life into this. As Christians, we believe that new life is a joy. It's a gift. It's always a gift of the Lord. It's always something to be celebrated. I think these are evidences in our culture that there is a hating of life. There's a dual deception. We somehow still think life is what Solomon did, right? We still think that's true life. Boy, like if I can be successful. And we're actually using that as our measure to determine if we'll bring someone else into this life. Can they have that kind of life, or are there more barriers to get there? Oh, if there are, well then that's not a life worth living. That's a life unworthy of life. We kind of are deceived in both ways. Let's move on. The author kind of comes to some conclusions here. He kind of says, boy, you can almost hear it in his language. There's a hard shift. It almost seems like a non sequitur for him to just step back like this. I think he realizes it's a very dark place to be in these considerations. If I really take these thought patterns to their logical conclusions, it's not a good place. So he steps back and he says, well, there is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For the one who pleases God, for to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to the one who pleases God. This also is vanity and striving after wind. So what he says is, he kind of comes to the conclusion like, you know what? There are some simple joys in creation. You know, like at a certain point, stop. Don't take yourself to those logical conclusions. If you're really stepping back and you're trying to assess the end of all things in this life under the sun, if you're really trying to find meaning in the things of this world, he said it's not going to lead you to a great place. But like, try not to consider those too much. Instead, like, enjoy the small things in life. And this is one of the big themes of the letter. And there's something true to this, right? Like, go and have a good meal with someone. Go and have some laughter. Go and have some good drink with someone, right? Go and take some joy in the small things. These are gifts of God. They're good for your soul. And then he says, you know what? And then live a wise life, right? Don't give yourself to that foolish path that I just laid out. It's more destructive than just living a wise life. Maybe it doesn't mean anything in the end, but it's a lot better journey to be on, right? He said God even seems to honor that in some sense. He'll give blessing and knowledge and joy to someone who's kind of living in that. Whereas if someone's not, then all of their toil is really just going to be to help someone else make it a little bit easier in this world. And so live a wise life. Don't think about these things too much. Go ahead and find joy in your toil and in the small things of life. And there's a real truth to this, is there not? Right? Like, my father is a grief counselor. Everything he does all day, every day is he deals with people and he counsels people who have recently experienced a death in the family or someone close to them, and they're dealing with grief and they're dealing with depression. And one of the first things they tell them, I say, hey, be sure not to get stuck in these frames of thinking. Be sure not to get stuck there. Go and find small joys. Go and do something that brings you some happiness. Go and take a walk. Go and hang out with friends. Make sure to find some joy in life. These are gifts of God. They're good for your soul. They're meant to interrupt life in this toilsome, wearisome life that we live under the sun. And they're meant to give you a reprieve. Take advantage of them. Do them. Pour into them. And someone here who might be in a depressive state, they might be battling with some of this weariness. They might be starting to give their heart up to despair. You need to hear that. You know, step one, just go and break the pattern. Break out of that kind of yearning of heart that just keeps cycling and cycling. Break out of that mindset and just find anything you can that is a gift, a good, clean, right gift of God, and break out of it. Something that's good, something that's enjoyable, something that lets you breathe and lets you kind of expand your chest a little bit, right? There's a real wisdom in that. But It's not a satisfying, complete answer. You know, the author of Ecclesiastes, in his man-centered, deistic, maybe even secular kind of frame of reference here, it's kind of the only place he's able to bring us to. And he almost reinstitutes the idea of ignorance is bliss, does he not? He kind of says like, okay, I've shown you where those thoughts lead. Maybe don't trace those thoughts to their end conclusion. Stop thinking about all that. Don't think that out. Don't let your heart get caught up in that. And kind of, as best you can, ignorance is bliss. You know, enjoy your toil. And you're like, wait a second, you just said you hated all your toil at what you toiled. You toiled better than them all, Solomon. You're telling me to enjoy my toil now? And he's just saying, yeah, maybe ultimately it's meaningless, but don't dwell on those things. It's a very popular mindset today in a secular culture we live in. I pulled a quote. I'm not going to read it all for you, by Thomas Nagel, eminent philosopher at NYU University, one of the top philosophy programs in the world year after year, an ethicist. And he said, you know what? In the end, he'll say the exact same thing as Solomon. In the end, all this is going to end. Nothing's going to be worth anything. So maybe this idea of trying to find meaning in life, maybe that's just beyond us. Maybe we just take ourselves too seriously, and we should just kind of enjoy the small things in life. And that's the solution he comes to in a whole book on meaning, where the title of the book is What Does It All Mean? You can go read it for yourself. And this is a popular thought pattern in our culture right now. But that's not where the Bible ends. That's not the full story. Not even close. Because we serve a God. We serve Jesus, who came and he said, I came to give you life and to give it abundantly. Abundant life. That's what I bring to you. Not life as people are trying to live it under the sun, pursuing their hedonistic pleasures, trying to build something of themselves, trying to make something of themselves and find satisfaction in what they've accomplished. I'm not talking about that kind of life. I'm not even talking about the wise life where you sit back and you kind of see that everyone else is foolish, but I'm not involved in any of that, so I'm the wise one. I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about true life, eternal life, a life of real joy, a life of real meaning, a life of real purpose. And they says, that's what I've come to give you. And we believe these things. That's where the Bible brings us to. He said, boy, we couldn't find life in the things of this world. But Jesus brought us true life. You know, at the beginning of creation, we had a good life. We had life as God designed it. We had perfect relationship with God. And perfect relationship with others. Harmony with others, harmony with nature. And we were in right relationship with God. We walked in the presence of the glory and the majesty and the beauty of the Lord himself. Perfect relationship. We had perfect health. There was no disease. There was no sickness. There were no natural disasters that took everything out, took people out of this world, seemed meaningless, out of nowhere. And there's perfect joy. Perfect joy as we walked and the blessings of God and knowing God. And then we broke that. So this is the gospel message. If you want to know what we believe around here, if you want to know the core of everyone's faith in this room who calls themselves a Christian, this is what we believe. This is what God gave us. He said, boy, I want to give you life. And you said, no, I want to try to make my own life. I want to find my own meaning, my own purpose in life. I want to make myself wiser. I think I can figure this out on my own. We decided to worship ourselves instead of worship God. Find our identity, try to find our satisfaction in ourselves instead of God. And that's why sin came into this world. We find creation broken. We find ourselves broken. But then Jesus comes. He says, I've come to give you life and to give it abundantly. And that sin that had separated us from God and put a barrier between us, he said, I'm eliminating that barrier. I'm the perfect sacrifice. I'm God himself. I'm going to take the nails that you deserve for turning away from God. I'm going to kill that sin. And that cross, that's why that cross is such an important part of our faith. But we don't stop there. If we stop there, our faith would be void. Because it's about that resurrection. Jesus didn't just come and he died, but he defeated death. And then he gives us life. He defeated sin, he defeated death, and he gives us life. And now we find that we have perfect peace with God through Christ. Not only that, we can actually have the love relationship that has existed in the Trinity, that we would be loved as Jesus is loved, and that we would have the ability through the Spirit to love God as he has loved back himself in that Trinity, that perfect, pure love relationship that we crave in this life. That we can have it. We have right relationship with God. We have right relationship with others. Jesus says, as I have loved you, you go and you love others. And he enables us to do that through the power of his Spirit. We have peace with God, peace with others. We have healing. Read the Gospels. There's physical healing. God delights to heal physical maladies as a reflection of his glory and his power over this created order. He says, I am the Lord. I am sovereign. I am provident over all this. And it is my hand that can step in and heal. And he gives physical healing often, but more than that. More importantly, he heals us from the main thing that kills us, and that's our sin. Our sin that leads to death and destruction. Our sin that is trying to draw us into a path of destruction every single day. And he says, that's the main thing that separates you from me. That's the thing that's killing you, not only your physical life, but also your spiritual life. And I heal you from your main enemy, sin, and that inexorable end, death. The vexation of the preacher, Solomon. He said, yeah, you're going to die. There's an end. But in me, that's going to be an entrance into true life. That's not the thing that stops it all and proves it all to be meaningless and that takes all your meaning and joy out of life. No, it's at that point that you actually step into life, true life, eternal life, a life where there is no more sickness, a life where there is no more disease, where there is no more brokenness, where we're back with God, enjoying his perfect blessing, and we have eternal joy in God. Eternal joy in the Creator who is perfect and glorious and beautiful and wonderful to behold, eternally so, to where we can never stop delighting in the wonder and the beauty and the majesty of God. Perfect joy, eternal joy. That's our eternal hope. And also in Christ, it's something that we can live in the here and now by holding fast to those promises. So Christian, does your life reflect that? Where are you at? You look back on the previous weeks. Are you one who tends to give up your heart to despair? Kind of hate life sometimes? The message is not what the author of Ecclesiastes brings us to. It's not, well, stop thinking about those things. Don't take it to the logical conclusion. It says, no, actually what you believe that more deeply. Be more rational. Pour into your faith even more. Right? Because this is what we believe. We believe in this God. We believe in this Jesus. Pour yourself more into it. Base your life on it more and more. Preach it to yourself. This life will throw at you 100 things this week. I said this last week, but it's going to happen again this week. It's going to try to steal your joy. It's going to try to convince you that this life is all there is. And the eyes of your heart are going to be focusing on this created order. And you're like, boy, this is so unsatisfying. And I kind of hate life. And there's so much to give up my heart unto despair. Right? And we're saying, no, that's not true. You have to remind yourself it's not true. That's not what I believe. I serve a God who is in control. He's in control in my life, and he is working all things together for my good. And he has given me life. He's given it abundantly. You have to remind yourself of it. Oftentimes we don't live in this because our hearts just don't know it. Your heart has to know it. What's that look like? It reminds reminding yourself, bring yourself back to the core things, thankfulness. Oh, are you thankful unto the Lord for his grace? Oh man, what a glory that we don't have to be caught in the despair of trying to find life and joy and meaning under this sun. What a tragedy. But he has revealed to our heart the light of the knowledge of the glory of God, 2 Corinthians 4. And we know the Lord, and we know that there's a hope. We know that there's a future. We know that there's a joy to be had in the here and now. We know that there's peace with God. There's healing to be had. That the Lord is a God who blesses us. Thankfulness. You have to remind yourself. Bring yourself back to thankfulness, praise. You have to sit in it. There's a lot of things that will try to cloud your heart this week to do something else. If I could have the team come up, the worship team, here at the end, I want to speak to someone who you know you're not a follower of Christ. You know that Jesus is not the Lord of your life. There's a lot of things that lord over your life, but you know it's not Jesus. You know that you don't love God and desire Him above all the other things of this world. You know that you're trying to find your life and your joy and your happiness and your meaning in the things of this world. And you've never said, well, I'm gonna look beyond this life under the sun. I'm gonna look to God. I'd much rather have that life that He gives. I really need some healing in my life. I really need some healing in my life. And maybe you've come to the point where you recognize that. Oh boy, I'd love to have peace with God. Oh, that sounds wonderful. I would love to have the ability to love others well and to radiate that peace unto others. Boy, that sounds beautiful. That sounds like something I need. Boy, I'd love to have joy. Man, I've never had real joy. What if I could have a joy that could persist throughout all the ups and downs of this broken creation? Would you love to have joy? Real joy. Eternal joy. Let today be the day. You know, we started with the joke about coronavirus, and chances are it's not going to be the big tragedy that people tend to think it is, but it does remind us. Tomorrow's not promised to us, right? I didn't read the statistics earlier about suicide, but one of the stark ones was that it's the second leading cause of death from people 10 to 34 years old. And that's a bracing number. The first cause of death is just accidents. Road accidents, work accidents. We all drive the roads. We all work every day. We're not promised tomorrow. Don't go another second of your life living in the misery of trying to find meaning and joy and purpose and hope in the things of this world. It will not satisfy. It will end in hell. And there's a dark end to that path. The Lord offers you life, and life abundantly. I'm going to ask some guys, some pastors, some spiritual leaders of the church to step up and just be at the back. Be at the back, or maybe there'll be a couple people at the front. Look for people who are standing up. Go have a conversation. We're going to step into a time. Christians, take a few minutes to just come into a heart of thankfulness and praise. Really ascertain, really get these things into your heart. Remember the Lord. Remember the goodness and the grace that He's given you in Christ. Recall that to mind. Apply it to something you have coming in your life or something you've been resting in and that's been burdening you down. Come into a time of thankfulness and praise and turn your eyes unto the Lord anew. And if you do not know the Lord, take this chance. Take this chance. Go have a conversation. It'll be the best thing you do, not only in this life, but in the one to come as well. Amen.
Thank you for listening to the Shield Wall Podcast. Our goal is to glorify Christ and strengthen the hearts of men. We've got more episodes on the way, so if you liked what you heard, subscribe and share. For more info and articles, visit our website, shieldwalldiscipleship.org. You can also find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Just search for Shield Wall Discipleship. Thanks again, and until next time, hold the line.